Good evening and welcome to our Monday night shiur on Sefer Mishle. We are continuing with the third Perek Gimel Pasuk Hey. If you're following inside, thank you for joining us tonight. I want to begin by mentioning a name that you are probably not familiar with. The name I'm thinking about is Bernard Haller. Bernard Haller was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Marines, and he fought in World War II. Bernard Haller was a Jew, and on his tombstone, the following is written: I served in the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II as a staff sergeant. I managed to put on tefillin every day, even during combat in the Pacific, and refrained from eating meat the entire time. And in big letters, it writes, "The Almighty helped me survive." This is what is on the tombstone of Bernard Haller, a person that gave everything, put his full trust in God during a very, very difficult time of world history. Ensured to wear tefillin every day, and as well refrain from eating meat. When halacha tells you you are allowed to eat non-kosher meat during times of war, you have no other choice. God will forgive you. But he did so. And he refrained from eating meat. He refrained from skipping a day of putting on tefillin, and this is what was written on his tombstone. And I think this is a perfect segue into our next pasuk in Mishle, where Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Betach el Hashem bechol libecha, ve'el binatecha al tisha'en. Trust in Hashem with all your heart, and do not rely upon your own understanding. So Rashi, who we like to start with, explains this in terms of the study of Torah. Trusting in Hashem, spending time, money, in search to study Torah, finding the right teacher to teach you, and don't depend on your own understanding. This trait was personified by Hillel HaZaken, who gave away half of his minimal daily earnings for the privilege just to enter the Bet HaMidrash, the study hall, as brought down in Masechet Yomah. The Vilna Gaon says, what does it mean, Ve'el binatecha al tisha'en? Do not rely do not rely on your understanding. He says, use it as al tisha'en lashon mish'anet. Mish'anet is a crutch, because a person will be tempted to rely on his intelligence as a supplement to trust in God, and therefore the pasuk is telling us, do not rely on the crutch, on your own bina, but rather put your full emunah and bitahon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you do the opposite, if a person has too much self-reliance, God forbid, it will cause him to forfeit the Ezra, the assistance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he would normally receive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to provide a person with non-stop assistance, but he wants us to be cognizant of the fact that Hashem is there helping us. And a person begins to rely on his own intelligence, indicates that the assistance by God is unnecessary. Rabbeinu Bachya ben Pekuda, the author of the famous Chovot HaLevavot, lists 10 progressive levels of human trust, starting from when a person is an infant towards the end of his life. And he says level 1 is a newborn infant who trusts in his mother's breast to feed him or her, because that's his sustenance, that's their lifeline. Without that, they can't survive. Level 2, as he grows, he begins to sense reality, and therefore he trusts his mom, and only his mom. because she is the one that cares for him or her devotedly. After that, when he observes that his mother depends on his father for her own protection, then he transfers his trust to the father. At which point after that, when he's old enough to earn his own livelihood, he transfers his trust to his own strength and skill. The fifth level is if his livelihood depends on other people, such as your boss, then he'll place his trust in him or her. As his binah, his understanding grows more and more, he recognizes that humans are deficient in their understanding, and they will rely a little bit more on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the Creator. But first, he only transfers his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in matters where he is helpless. When I don't know what else to do, I transfer my trust to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need parnasam. I don't know what else to do. I looked everywhere. I need a shidduch. I need to have I'm looking for a child. I don't know what else, so I transfer my trust to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A higher level, says Rabbeinu Bachya, is a more complete level in trust would entail reliance on God even in areas where he is not completely helpless, where he gives up exhausting occupations and trust God will provide him in other forms. That is a higher level of trust. Eventually, level 8, he says, a person will trust God in all of his affairs, difficult and easy, and direct all of his efforts to his avodat Hashem and his observance of mitzvot. Now you would think that's the highest, but no, there's two more. He says when he realizes a higher realization of rahmanut, of divine mercy, of rachamim, then a person happily accepts God's will and desires only what HaKadosh Baruch Hu desires for him. Life or death, poverty or wealth, health or sickness, makes no difference. And last but not least, when man's knowledge of God becomes stronger, so strong, he understands why he was created in the first place and realizes the value there is to Olam Haba, to the next world. And his joy and love for God will cause him to turn away from all worldly pleasures. And that is the highest level of Bitahon, the one that we are mentioning in this pasuk. Betach el Hashem bechol libecha ve'el binatcha al tisha'en. Don't rely on your own understanding. Shlomo HaMelech continues in pasuk Vav. Bechol derachecha da'ehu vehu yeyasher orchotecha. In arguably one of the more famous pesukim in all of Tanakh, this one right here. Bechol derachecha da'ehu. In all your ways know him, and he will smooth your paths. Vehu yeyasher orchotecha. Bar Kapara in Masechet Brachot says that this pasuk actually encapsulates all the main ideas in the Torah. The entire Torah is really a guide to the application of God's will to life and human behavior. That's what Bar Kapara refers to. And therefore, to know him in all your ways, bechol derachecha da'ehu, even in the mundane, is found in this pasuk. And we learn this also in Perkei Avot, where Perkei Avot we are taught v'chol ma'asecha yu l'shem shamayim. All your deeds should be for the sake of heaven. When a person eats, we mentioned this before in the past, he should be cognizant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the wisdom in the creation of the food and how it's done, how this food came about, how the food is being digested in my insides, in my intestines, in my stomach, which allows a person to benefit from the food. This is also recognizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'chol ma'asecha yu l'shem shamayim. Well, a person shouldn't live to eat, but eat to live. There was once a story of Rebbetzin Nechama Cook, who was the grandmother of Rav Simcha Cook, who was the Rav of Rechovot. And when she was older, she became sick and weak. And so her family told her that the halacha states that when a person is to a point where they're too sick and the eating is something that they have to do, they're not allowed to fast the major fast, even Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. So her family went up to her and said, listen, Savta, you're old, you're advanced in your years, you can no longer fast for Yom Kippur. She broke down and cried. Tears, crying. And her grandchildren tried to comfort her and said, Savta, others people have a mitzvah to fast on Yom Kippur. You have a mitzvah to eat. You don't feel bad about it. This is what Hashem wants from you right now, to try to comfort her. So Savta looked at her grandchildren and told her, you don't understand why I'm crying. She said, all my life, I have been trained to eat for the sake of heaven. When I was a child, I ate so I could have strength to help my mother. When I got married, I ate so I could have strength to be a good wife to my husband and mother to my children. Now my husband is gone and my children are grown up. What's the purpose of me eating for? So I consoled myself with the thought that I will eat during the year so that I'll have enough strength to fast on Yom Kippur. But now that I'm not able to fast on Yom Kippur, what purpose will there be for me eating year-round? And that's the reason why I cry. Incredible story. We see, instead of resting just because you're tired and craving sleep, think about how the sleep will restore your energy for the important tasks of life. The pursuit of Torah and mitzvot, a healthy body, a fresh mind. Those are the tools that we need for spiritual growth. Same thing when it comes to earning a living. It should never be confused with amassing wealth. That is not the purpose. Never should be the purpose. A person's intention when earning a living is to support his family, to give tzedakah, to raise his children, and enable them to study Torah. A person who carefully weighs and considers each one of his actions carefully, trying to see and determine that whatever he does is going to be for the benefit of himself towards the service of God and Avodat Hashem, and then you know that you're doing everything you could to serve Him properly. The Chafetz Chaim writes that a person infuses spirituality. A person who does so earns reward even for the time of his day where he is not necessarily involved in spiritual matters. So I could be learning Torah for a few hours of the day and I can be working the rest of the day. But if while I'm working, I'm doing it for a holy purpose, it's ke'ilu I was studying the Torah the whole day. That's what the Chafetz Chaim says. A person can infuse holiness and spirituality into a workday simply by doing something that l'shem shamayim, for the reason, for the real purpose that it was for. And therefore, same thing when I'm eating, same thing when I'm drinking, all utilize to serve God. The Torah tells us, Vayitalech Chanoch et ha'elokim, that Chanoch walked with God. And the Midrash expounds that Chanoch was a cobbler. And with each stitch that he sewed, Meyached yichudim lekono, he was thinking profound thoughts of his Creator. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, great father of the Musar movement, he explains the words of the Midrash. He says, Chanoch surely wasn't occupied, his mind wasn't occupied with thoughts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu while he was doing his avodah, while he was stitching things for other people, so sewing shoes. If he was to do so, it would go against halakha. That's not what you're being paid to do. I'm paying you to build a shoe. I want you to create for me a good shoe. You're now thinking of God while you're creating a shoe. You're actually not allowed to do so. You have to build me a proper shoe. Do something what you're paid for. Rather, says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, that his devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was indicated by making sure that every stitch in the shoe would be to the customer's satisfaction. If I can make him happy, that's all I care for. And that is enough to declare, Vayitalech Chanoch et ha'elokim, the Chanoch walked with God. He was zealous to avoid cheating customers, which is an act of devotion towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Once Rabbi Yecheskel Levenstein was treated with great kindness by his doctor. And Rav Yecheskel took the doctor's hand and advised him the following. He said, listen, doctor, when you practice medicine, don't only do it for mercenary reasons. When you treat your patients, have in mind that you're doing a chesed for them. Then the reward that you earn for the practice of medicine will be immeasurable. So we see that you could do mundane things. Be a doctor, be a shoemaker, a cobbler, anything, and be mitalech ima Elokim, walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is so even when a person, like I said, spends most of his day working and a few hours of Torah study, that yes, he will still have the ability to make those hours of work into something very, very holy. I must say that we have this opportunity, many of us that are in the workforce and spend much of our day 8 to 5, 9 to 5 working. We have a tremendous opportunity when it comes to Shabbat to use those moments to make up for a lot of the limud, the learning of Torah that we may have missed throughout the week. Obviously, we each all have an obligation to study Torah, a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night. But especially on Shabbat, the study of Torah, we prove to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we can use those free moments of learning, because I have to earn a livelihood during the week. But come Shabbat and I don't earn a livelihood, Hashem, this is for you. Now, Vadai, we have a long afternoon, we can spend an hour or two taking a nap, and of course having the meal. That's also very holy. But to waste away a long summer afternoon of 6 hours without a little bit of spirituality, without a dosage of holiness, is a big chaval. And therefore we need to push hard during those hours on Shabbat to search for that spirituality and that holiness. So the Meiri says, "Ve'afta et Hashem Elohecha bechol levavecha," and you shall love Hashem with all your heart. The Chachamim Masechet Brachot says, "What's levavecha?" Levavecha, your heart. Two bets in the word alludes to the two inclinations, the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, that both must be impressed into the service of God. Even the parts of life that are generally associated with the Yetzer Hara, with the evil inclination, they could be harnessed for the good by the intention of using them for Ahavat Hashem, for love of God. And Rabbeinu Yonah says that this pasuk, Bechol derachecha da'ehu, is really a continuation of the previous one that we started with, of Bitahon, Betach el Hashem. There are people who generally trust in God. They believe that everything is ordained by Him, and they don't rely on human strength or other people's intelligence. But again, this is only when it's matters of great concern. And they don't apply this bitahon, they don't apply this trust to the details of their day-to-day actions, to the small things. And therefore, the pasuk here is telling us, Bechol derachecha da'ehu, in all your ways you should know Hashem, in every detail of every action. For example, there are people that turn to God before a huge business deal or a dangerous undertaking, or again, a crucial business trip. But they don't think of Hashem in the small undertakings. Because the small undertakings, I know I'm going to succeed. No, even if you're taking a drive 20 minutes away, you have to have your trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There won't be traffic. There won't be, God forbid, a traffic accident. You want to get there on time. You don't think of that. People need to ask, I got to travel around the world. I got to make sure everything works okay. But why not the 20-minute commute? Why not the 30-minute commute? Why is it any different? So, Bechol derachecha da'ehu, whether they're big or small, a person should make sure to have his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And not only will your reward be so grand, so amazing and tremendous, it will also bring you success as well. Bechol derachecha da'ehu vehu yeyasher orchotecha, the pasuk ends. He will smooth your paths, and that is a reward coming for you. Your road to wherever you're going will be easy. And in some, Rabbeinu Yonah derives 4 teachings from this pasuk. A, regarding all of life's paths, place your trust in God. B, your goal should be to know, to serve, and to honor HaKadosh Baruch Hu by doing everything L'Shem Shamayim, as we said. 3, never let a pursuit of your parnasah, livelihood, or any other worldly goal drown out the message that is found, the divine message that's all around you. And 4, prior to any pursuit, make sure that it's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, what's his wishes, his goals. And whatever you do, recognize, know him, bechol derachecha da'ehu, his values and his priorities. And the Malbim writes on this and concludes that is why there's a difference between the two wordings here. There's derachim, derachecha is your main highways, your derech, and then there's your orchot, which are your small paths. Those are the ones that branch out from him. The small paths of Torah are endless because they deal with so many details that it would be impossible for a person to know how to react in every single way. So therefore, the pasuk instructs us, in all your ways know him, in the general modes of behavior, such as humility, compassion, tzedakah, generosity. Know him and emulate your ways. And if you do so, then you'll merit siyata dishmaya, divine assistance, so that even your paths, even the particulars of your daily life will be straight and correct. If you follow the main road of tzedakah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will inform you and help you know when, how much, and whom to give. Continuing, Shlomo HaMelech in Pasuk Zayin. Al tehi chacham be'einecha, yera et Hashem v'sur mera. Do not be wise in your eyes. Fear Hashem and turn away from evil. Rabbeinu Yonah explains that once Hashem smooths your ways and grants you success and wealth, don't credit this good fortune because of your own wisdom, as the wealthy often do. Chacham be'einav ish ashir. A rich man is wise in his own eyes, Shlomo HaMelech says later on in this book. And we find this concept in a warning that the Torah gives in Sefer Devarim. Pen tochal v'savata, lest you eat and be satisfied. Ve'amarta bilvavecha, you will say in your heart, Kochi ve'otzem yadi asali et ha'chayil hazeh. It was my strength, it was my might, the might of my hand that made me all this wealth. Now, we started off this shiur by talking about having trust in God. Betach el Hashem bechol libecha. Verse, that was Pasuk Hey. Pasuk Hey is prescribing the approach before you take any action. Rather than relying on your own intelligence, turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help. But this Pasuk, Al tehi chacham be'enecha, is referring to a person's attitude after he completes his mission and after he's achieved success. Don't attribute the success to your own power, but rather realize that everything results only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it to be that way. Yera et Hashem v'sur mera. Fear Hashem and turn away from evil. This fear of God is linked to the Bitahon, to the trust in God, which was the theme that we've been learning so far until now. A person can only attain fear by recognizing that everything is from Hashem, and he is constantly waiting and anticipating his siyata dishmaya, his help, and focusing all of his aspirations on him rather than human beings. In general, this book, Mishle, deals with the improvement of character traits, called Tikkun HaMidot. But this chapter, as we've seen so far and will continue to see, talks about the fixing, the tikkun, the rectification of a person's thinking, not so much of his midot. Tikkun divrei hasechel, by developing trust in God rather than relying on human intelligence. Because if a person's intelligence, if his sechel is proper, he can go on and acquire proper character traits. If a person's intelligence is warped, then he'll be deficient in his belief and trust in God. He will consider himself to be wise and the know-it-all, and he'll refuse to accept any rebuke or instruction. So if so, then how can he perfect his character? So first you have to perfect your sechel by knowing not to rely on your intelligence and to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. According to the Metzudot, this pasuk of Alti chacham beinecha yirat Hashem v'sur mera, is an attitude towards the gedarim. The gedarim are the fences, the protective fences that the chachamim gave us to prevent us from transgressing a Torah law, such as mukseh, for example, is a very famous example of a protective fence. Don't touch this because you might you might transgress a biblical command. So the Chachamim are Shlomo Melech is telling us here, don't be dismissive of these fences, thinking that they're unnecessary. And a lot of people feel that way when it comes to these gedarim. The Torah only says I cannot do this, but this is something that the rabbis made up. No, the fences are there for a reason. Fear God. That's why the pasuk tells us, fear God, and realize that despite your wisdom, you might stumble. Shlomo HaMelech himself made a mistake by relying on his own wisdom and assuming that his wisdom would protect him from going astray. He thought he wasn't bound by the prohibitions about the king having too many wives or too much wealth or too many horses. And what ended up happening? He married an Egyptian princess, Shlomo HaMelech. So maybe this is where he's coming from. Sur Merah, he's telling us, turn away from evil by distancing yourself from the fences. You don't want to distance yourself from the fences. You want to accept those fences and say, yes, I'm going to follow it. And that is the meaning of Yirat Hashem v'Sur Merah. Moving on. Rifut tehi lesharecha v'shikui le'atzmotecha. If you do so, it will be a health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Beautiful proverb here. And the Meiri explains that the navel represents the entire body because it is the conduit through which the fetus receives the nourishment. And like a mother who is nourishing her fetus, the Torah will also heal bad character traits and the faulty ideologies of those people who began to nourish themselves from things that were imperfect. But after a person has attained perfection in Chokhmah, he has to maintain it. And he has to maintain it through constant attachment to the Torah. And just as human bones need marrow to strengthen them, so too a person's level of perfection needs constant reinforcement from its life force. Veshikui latzmotecha, marrow to your bones. The Torah's Chokhmah is foreign to man's desire. So a person might feel that it dictates, for example, restrictions on food, which would have detrimental effect on our body, on our health. And in truth, these restrictions on our physical desires are for our benefit. It strengthens our bones. It doesn't weaken them, chas v'shalom, as in the case if a person was to indulge in worldly pleasures and drink so much and eat so much. That actually does weaken an individual. It was said about Rabbi Yechezkel Levenstein, who we mentioned earlier in the shiur, that he had such a devotion for prayer throughout the year, especially during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And that even when he was in his late 80s, he was a thin, frail man, and he would stand motionless during the Amidah of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and focus his entire being on the words of the Siddur. They say about him that on Yom Kippur, by the time he would finish Shacharit Amidah, the congregation would already be at Musaf Amidah. And his Musaf Amidah would extend until Mincha. So we see elderly, frail, thin man remained on his feet almost the entire day. So I ask you, what gives you the strength? The Torah gives you the strength. The Tefillah gives you the strength. Kabed et Hashem et mehonecha umereshit kol tevuatecha. Honor Hashem with your wealth and with the first of all your produce. This is Shlomo HaMelech's advice, to recognize that all your success is from God, and by honoring Him from your wealth and your first of your produce, you're displaying that. When a person uses his wealth for mitzvot and for charity, he demonstrates his Bitahon, which is again the theme of today's shiur. And the person from these Pesukim will learn to trust God, that God will bless him with generosity God will bless him with abundance because of his generosity. It will cause his possessions to increase as a result. And the more one depletes, the more Hashem increases. As the Jerusalem proverb writes, Melach mamon cheser. To salt money, diminish it. What does that mean? The way to preserve money, like salt preserves meat, the way to preserve money is diminish it. How do you diminish it? You give tzedakah. The more tzedakah a person gives, the more money is preserved for him. And this can be compared again to a nursing mother. As long as the infant nurses from the mother, the milk increases. But once he is weaned, then her milk dries up. There was a story of along this theme of Rav Levi told a man who was always meticulous to separate his maaser, his tithes properly, and his field produced 1,000 measures of whatever he was planting, and he would give all of his tithes to support the needy and those who weren't well off, and the remainder he would give to his family. Before his death, he instructed his son to continue exactly what he was doing to ensure that he would be okay. The first year after his father's death, the son did so, but the second year he regretted giving so much of the crop, so he decreased the measure by 100. So 100 out of 1,000. So every 100 he decreased it by 10. The field, as a result, in turn, reduced its yield by 100 measures. And each successive year, its produce, the field reduced what it produced proportionally, because he kept on decreasing. He goes, okay, if I have less production, that means I need to give less charity. He didn't understand. His friends and his relatives said, I don't get it. Until now, you were the master of the field, and God was like the Kohen. Now, you have become the Kohen. You're only left with the small percentage, and God is the master of the field. Basically tell him, you missed it. You didn't understand what your father was trying to tell you. You could have been the master of your field. Just got to give God a little bit. 10%, that's it. But the moment you start decreasing that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes it all back. Aser te'aser et kol tevuat zarecha. Aser bishvil shetit'asher, as we know. Tithe, so that you should become wealthy, as it brought down Masechet Shabbat. Kabed et Hashem meonecha. Honor Hashem with your wealth. Rashi says, meonecha mikol ma shechanancha. With whatever He favored you. Meonecha also could be translated as migeronecha, as your throat. Meaning, if you have a pleasant voice, you should use that to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. When a person uses his voice, his intention needs to be L'Shem Shamayim, not to show off, God forbid, or to be admired, or to act haughty or arrogant, because then his voice is despised by God. We see in Sefer Melachim the severity of one not using his voice to honor Hashem. There was a story of Navot and his kerem, the famous vineyard of Navot. When he made the pilgrimage to Yerushalayim, all of Israel would gather to hear the voice of Navot. His sweet voice, he had a beautiful voice, and he would sing L'chvod HaChag, all the holidays. One year, this man Navot decided not to go to Yerushalayim. And that year that he decided not to go was the year that Queen Jezebel was one of the worst queens to live. That was the year that she plotted to get the vineyard of Navot and plotted with her husband Achav and Jezebel, to get the vineyard from him, this famous vineyard. And she hired witnesses to testify against Navot and had him executed. And although Jezebel's intention was to have Achav gain just a vineyard, not to kill him, but the tragedy was caused by who? It was caused because Navot refused to go to grace God during the Hagim. And since he did not use his voice properly and positively, Therefore, the voice of false testimony by those fake witnesses was put into effect against him. Others want to say that this teaches us the importance of honoring one's parents. We see, because we have the same commandment here, kabed et Hashem mehonecha, honor Hashem with your wealth, and that we use the same lashon with regards to our parents, kabed et avicha v'et imecha. So it's fitting that all three, God, Father, and Mother, who are the partners in creation, we have three partners in creation, that we give them the proper respect. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives even greater importance to honoring our parents than honoring himself. How do we know that? In speaking of his own honor, it says, Kabed Hashem mehonecha, with your wealth. Poverty frees a person from many, many mitzvah obligations. Some mitzvot a poor person is still obligated to do, but there are mitzvot that a person is exempt if he's destitute. But the Torah states nothing about wealth in connection with the commandment of honoring one's parents. It doesn't happen. Whether you're poor or you're wealthy, you still have a commandment to honor your parents. But if you're poor, then there are certain mitzvot you don't have to do, and therefore thereby not honoring God by performing those mitzvot. So even the poor and the destitute are obligated to perform this mitzvah. And last but not least, the final pasuk we're going to learn today, Veimalu asamecha sava v'tirosh yekavecha yifrotzu. Then your storehouses will be filled with plenty, and the wine of your vats will burst forth. Not only will you not lack anything, because of your charity, but your produce will be blessed and increased. So will the wine in your vats. The Torah prohibits the idea of testing God. A person is not allowed to test God, ever. Lo tenasu et Hashem. You shall not test God. The Jewish people have no right to doubt Hashem and what He does. A person may not say, I'm going to perform this mitzvah in order that I succeed financially, because I'm going to go see if God is going to give me what I want because I'm performing this mitzvah, because I'm honoring my parents, or because I am refraining from speaking lashon hara. However, there is one time that our rabbis tell us, there is one exception to this prohibition with regarding the giving of tzedakah, the giving of tithes, ma'aser. Haviu et kol ma'aser uvchanuni na bazot. In Sefer Malachi says, bring me all the tithes and test me on this, and see if I don't shower you with blessing. And Pesukim Tet and Yud, this concept of honoring Hashem with your wealth, with all the first of your produce, and then all your storehouses will be filled with plenty, and the wine of your vats will burst forth. This is the permissible test. This is this test that we are allowed to do. We're telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm testing you. I'm honoring you with my tzedakah. Let's see. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in return, Shlomo HaMelech is saying, will fill your storehouses with plenty. This is the outcome that a person will get for one who gives tzedakah properly. A person who dedicates one's wealth into God, in God's honor, this person will be rewarded with full storehouses and bursting vats. And Bezat Hashem, next week we will continue in Shlomo HaMelech's tremendous work here in Perek Gimel. Wishing you all a wonderful night ahead. Be well.